Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Love Our Lands virtual learning series. And we are really excited to welcome Pam Houston this evening. And she is just about to join us, so we're just going to start in about a minute or two. Thanks for your patience. And welcome, Pam. I see that you just joined us. We just want to make sure that your video and your sound is working.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm so sorry. I couldn't find the link anywhere. And then the new link went to my junk, and I guess it all went to my junk, and I just saw it on my phone or something. Anyway, here I am.
Well, welcome. So you are here with all of us. I think there are about 30 of us right here with you, and welcome.
Thank you.
And I was just giving a brief welcome, and we'll start in just a moment. But before we do that, Pam, I want to just make sure that you can share your screen. So let me just make sure you can do that. So before we formally begin, Pam, will you just make sure you have that you can screen share? Because I know you're going to be doing that in a few minutes.
Yes, let me just pull that up.
And then we'll jump in.
And then let me see you again. There it is, right?
Yay. Okay, wonderful. All right, just want to make sure that works. So I'm going to introduce you, Pam, and you can save that for you can either leave it up if you would like. I think it's up to you. But I just want to first welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm Deb McNamara. I'm the campaign director with 350 Colorado, and I just want you all can hear me, right? If anyone could just give me a thumbs up. Okay, great. So welcome to this event. This is a really special event for us at 350 Colorado. We have the great honor of welcoming Pam Houston, author Pam Houston, and I'll introduce her formally and hand it over to her in just a minute. But this is a different kind of event for us. So we're hosting a virtual learning series. And of course, being virtual is very different than what we had initially planned with you, Pam. Pam was supposed to be with us in person this spring, but then coronavirus happened. So we're sorry to miss the in-person event with you, but delighted that we can be here online together. So this event is part of a virtual learning series with a theme of loving our lands. And we had an event a few weeks ago with the theme of protecting. So we hosted a film on protecting public lands. And then this evening, we're delighted to talk with you about your new book, or we'll hear about your new book, and we'll hear about Deep Creek. And the theme for tonight is connect. So not only are we excited about just connecting together in this virtual space, but also just hearing from you about your connection with your land and your stories through Deep Creek. So we're really looking forward to hearing from you on that. So I just want to say welcome. And Pam, I'm going to formally introduce you, and then I will hand it over to you. So Pam Houston is the author of the memoir Deep Creek, Finding Hope in the High Country, as well as 2 novels, Contents May Have Shifted and Sighthound, 2 collections of short stories, Cowboys Are My Weakness and Waltzing the Cat, and a collection of essays, A Little More About Me, all published by W.W. Norton. Her stories have been selected for volumes of the O. Henry Awards, the Pushcart Prize, Best American Travel Writing, and Best American Short Stories of the Century, among other anthologies. She's the winner of the Western States Book Award, the Willow Award for Contemporary Fiction, the Evil Companions Literary Award, and several teaching awards. She currently teaches in the low-res MFA program at the Institute of American Indian Arts, is professor of English at UC Davis, and co-founder and creative director of the literary nonprofit Writing by Writers. As we know, she lives here in Colorado at 9,000 feet above sea level near the headwaters of the Rio Grande. We're really excited to hear from you tonight, Pam. We hope you'll tell us a little bit about your new book coming out in October as well. Just so everybody on this meeting knows, Pam is publishing a new book called Airmail, and that is going to be available, I believe, in the next month or so. So we'd love to hear about that as well. So Pam, I'm going to hand it over to you and would invite you to share the story of how Deep Creek came about. Looking forward to hearing from you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry about the bumpy ride getting in here. But I will, I think I'll share my screen and start running these slides so that you can see what I'm talking about, because you can still see me up in the corner. You can still see my face, my smaller face, my better face when it's smaller. So these pictures that are gonna run while I'm talking for 10 or 15 minutes right now are all just snapshots over the years from the ranch. And I'll tell you the story of how I came to the ranch, and I'll tell you the story of how I wound up here and how this book, Deep Creek, came about. And then I'll just read you a very little bit from it so you get the gist of it. But so the book Deep Creek, which is my story of my 25 years, now 27 years here on this 120 acres in Mineral County, Colorado. The book itself came about because my editor at W.W. Norton, my longtime publisher, said to me, I want you to go on a book-length adventure and then write about it write a memoir of it. This is about 10 years ago. We had this conversation. And I love an adventure. I'm an adventuring sort. And so I thought, well, you know, I'll mush dogs to the North Pole, or I'll sail around the coast of Turkey, or I'll do some really cool adventure that I've always wanted to do, and my publisher will pay for it, and that'll be great. And so I made a list of these adventures that I might go on, and, you know, was mulling them over and deciding which one to push into and do research on. And then I was on my way home to the ranch from UC Davis, where I teach for about 10 weeks a year. I'm out in California. And I was on my way home and driving across Highway 50, the loneliest road in America. And the dogs, you know, don't love their 10 weeks at Davis. It's a lot less fun than being at the ranch. And so when we were driving home, the dogs are so excited, and we stop and we take walks up into the national forest. And, you know, I was just walking and thinking, and the dogs knew they were on the leashless side of the Sierra and ready to head home. And I just thought, you know, I'm already having my book-length adventure. Like, I don't really need to go on one. My book-length adventure began 27 years ago when I sold my first book, Cowboys Are My Weakness, to W.W. Norton for $21,000. And I say the amount just because it becomes important later in the story. It was more money than I'd ever had. I was a graduate student at the time. I was making $4,500 a year teaching 7 sections of, you know, writing 101. And I sold Cowboys Are My Weakness to Norton. It was my final year of grad school. And I suddenly had this check for $21,000. And my agent said, don't spend it all on hiking boots, because she knew my type. And so I got in my car as soon as grad school ended for the year, and I drove all over the American West looking for a place to call home and looking for a place to put that money. And, you know, I really didn't know at the time what a major undertaking it was going to turn out to be, a 3-decade and counting undertaking. But anyway, I drove all over the West, and I gave readings from my new little book at all these great independent bookstores all over the West. And I got here to Creed after Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, you know, just really driving around and around. And met a real estate lady at a wedding. I got to town and like 5 minutes later, I was invited to a wedding. Cause you know, they're short on women up here. And so I got invited to a wedding and I met a real estate lady and she said, well, I'll take you out. And that's kind of how my summer had been going. I'd been like rolling into town, meeting the real estate lady, heading out to look at places. And she brought me here to this 120 acres that you're basically looking at pictures of. Just gorgeous high mountain meadow. It's such a beautiful day today. I don't know if you guys still have smoke down there, but we finally got rid of our smoke. And it is so glorious today to see the sky. And I was hiking right up until 4 o'clock. But in any case, you know, 12,000 foot peaks all around, the Rio Grande running across the front of the property. I was here the 3rd week of September. So all the aspens were doing their thing. And that barn that you're looking at, this beautiful 100-year-old barn and a small log house, small and simple 2-bedroom log house. And I fell absolutely in love with it. I mean, I didn't know anything about real estate. I was basically living in my Toyota Corolla. You know, I was so unprepared. I moved from a Toyota Corolla to a 120-acre ranch is really what happened. But in any case, I saw this piece of ground. I fell in love with it. My 21,000, which was all the money I had in the world, represented just under 5% down of the asking price of the ranch. And the asking price of the ranch had just been reduced. And the realtor lady, basically, by that time it was a guy, had gotten involved. But anyway, he said, you know, I think Donna Blair is going to like the idea of you. That was the widow who was selling the ranch. So why don't you give me a signed hardcover copy of Cowboys Are My Weakness and your $21,000 and I'll see what I can do. And a few days later, Donna Blair agreed to sell me the ranch for 5% down, not quite, even 5% down. And she also agreed to carry the note, which of course was the most important thing because no bank in the world should have or would have lent me $10 at that time in my life. And that decision, you know, which felt more like a calling. The first chapter of the book is called Some Kind of Calling. Like no one would have made that decision. You know, it had to have been preordained somehow, you know, but I think part of me thought, well, if this woman believes in me, maybe I can believe in myself. You know, I was just out of grad school. I had this book in the world and it was doing well, but I didn't have a contract for another book. I didn't have 3 pages of another book written. I didn't have a job. I grew up squarely in Pennsylvanian suburbia. You know, I thought hot water just came out of the wall like a miracle. Like I was so unprepared on so many levels to take on this piece of land. And yet I did, because I had fallen in love with it. And so began this now 27 years and counting love story with me and this ranch that became, you know, somewhere in the middle of all those years of trying to figure out how to pay for it, the story of my life. And in the beginning, I wrote anything anybody would pay me money to write. I wrote an insert for an ant farm. I wrote an article called Why Clint Eastwood is My Hero, which he certainly is not. I wrote so many things that would embarrass me now, but it was anything to make a ranch payment. And I taught, I started teaching, and I just started, you know, I'm sort of a workaholic by nature, so it was okay to work really hard to hang on to it. And I did. And along the way, it taught me how to be a human being. It taught me responsibility. It taught me how to care for something bigger than me. It taught me how to be with the dying. You know, I've lost a lot of animals over the years to one thing or another, as happens on a ranch. And it taught me, you know, it taught me how to forgive myself for not being perfect. It taught me so many life lessons. And it taught me to rely on the help of my neighbors and people who know more about fixing fences than I do. It also, maybe most importantly, gave me a safe place to be. When I turned in the first draft of this book, we had decided, and when I say we, I mean my editor, my agent, and me, we had decided that this book was really going to be all ranch all the time. It wasn't going to be about Pam's bad boyfriends. It wasn't going to be about Pam's crappy childhood. It was going to be like putting up wood and putting up hay and lambing and bluebirds and the Perseid meteor shower and feeding hay and 4.5 feet of snow and the year that, you know, the fire burned close to the ranch, and et cetera, et cetera. And that is what the book is. That is the meat of the book, the meat and the bones of the book. But when I wrote that book and turned it in, we all kind of agreed it wasn't quite a book. And it was my agent who said, you know, isn't this the book where you really talk about what happened to you as a child? Like, doesn't the ranch make more sense if it's the place that you healed from that? And she was absolutely right. And my first response when she said that was, God, have I done anything else in my entire life except talk about my childhood? But she said, you know, you've never done it in this straightforward way. You've never done it as memoir. You've never done it with the same kind of clarity and plain spokenness that you're talking about lambs and hay and wood. You know, why don't you try that? And so I did. And so that became the beginning of the book, a little bit about my childhood and, you know, how it was to grow up in a, you know, a very violent home. My father broke my femur when I was 4, and a lot of other bad things happened, you know. And then the other thing that happened in the middle of that big rewrite of that book, adding my childhood to the front end, I became, you know, increasingly aware over the 8 years it took me to write this book that, you know, the climate catastrophe that we are now in the middle of was coming, you know, and I sort of woke up to the fact that this was not this thing we had to worry about out in the future. It was now, you know, the 2013 West Fork fire, the fact that, you know, for the first time ever 2 summers ago, I had to buy hay for the whole summer because my pasture just didn't come up because, you know, we were so much drier than we'd ever been before. The fact that it generally feels about 10 degrees warmer here than it did when I moved here all the time in the dead of winter and in the heat of summer, you know, all the ways that we've all become much more aware of the climate catastrophe over these last 8 years, essentially. And so, and I realized in thinking about my childhood and thinking about climate change as potential subjects for this book, or potential scaffolding kind of for all the details of the ranch to hang off of, basically, I realized that I feel pretty much the same way about both things, about my childhood and the climate catastrophe. And when I say that, what I mean is, you know, that young girl had a rough go of it with a couple of parents who didn't want to be parents, but, you know, somehow I got to hear, like somehow that childhood led to this life that is better than anything I could have ever imagined, you know, where I get to do what I want for a living, and I get to teach these amazing students, and I get to understand their pain and their trauma, and I get to live in this fantastic place. So when I think of my childhood, I really think of it with this mixture of wonder and grief, you know, which is exactly how we feel, right? Or I hope we feel as a culture about the climate change, about climate catastrophe. You know, it's like the earth has gotten a lot more beautiful, you know, on a minute by minute basis in the face of its destruction, in the way that we're constantly reminded that it's dying, you know, and it's dying at our hands. And those are complicated emotions to hold, but I think holding them at the same time kind of means being a grown-up. So that is what this book is about, all of that, what I just said. And I'll just read you a couple paragraphs to give you just a feel of it. And then some other things will happen, and then I'll read a little bit of new work later, right? So when I was making the book, I really love form and structure. And I like to think about what it is in the world that anything I'm writing, any book or any story or any essay corresponds to physically. And for the ranch book, I knew it had to be a calendar, you know? I knew, Like the ranch is a calendar. If you are close to or own a piece of land, you understand that if you don't pay attention to the calendar, things are going to die and break and freeze, you know? And so I really wanted the book to be in the shape of a calendar, and it just wouldn't go. I literally tried for 2 years, banging my head against a wall, going January, February, March, and it just wouldn't do it. But then at the end, when I was rearranging all the pieces and trying to put it together, these 12 little mini essays that I call ranch almanacs, they came and became the interstitial material between the chapters, and they do go in the shape of a calendar, and they became my calendar. I knew I would get my calendar back. I just had to write in the dark for a few years until it came back to me. But anyway, this is one of those little pieces, and it's called Almanac. It's actually the last one in the book. It's as beautiful a thing as I have ever known, living inside the ranch's almanac. How the weather shapes and dictates our lives, not just during a blizzard, but in every season. How the Leonids always follow the Perseids, how the monsoon always follows fire season, how wood follows hay and lambs follow the draining of the pasture, how lupin follows paintbrush, which follows phlox, which follows iris, which follows the arrival of the bluebirds, which follows the last day of below zero cold. There's the way the sun warms the house right after sunrise through the east-facing kitchen window. There's the smell of 250 bales of fresh hay in the barn on a warm September afternoon, and the colors in the sky over Bristolhead at dusk. A good bed of coals in the wood stove, a pot of Hungarian mushroom soup on the range, the fuchsia blooms of the skyrocket on either side of the driveway, a coyote pausing, 1 foot in the air, crossing my pasture, feet deep in snow. The smell of lanolin rising off the sheep, 5 elk beds near the creek in the back acreage, still holding warmth from the vacated elk. The tiny tracks of mice in the snow. Roni, impatient for carrots, staring me down through the kitchen window on a frigid January morning. Orion, so bright and close outside my bedroom window in February, it's as if he's waiting for an invitation. The barn, always the barn, and its roofline against the blue of the mountain. The Milky Way, appearing nightly and milky above me. Moonglow on Pinkley's cabin, on the barn roof, on the snow in the pasture on a midnight cross-country ski. The screech of a red tail, the hoot of a barn owl, the high singing of a coyote, the bugle of an elk, or some other wild thing calling. A silence so big I can hear my own silence inside it. These are only a few of the ways the ranch mothers me.
Thank you so much, Pam. It's such a gift to have you, and I just want to say thank you, and we're really excited to talk more and go a bit deeper into different parts of your book. I'm wondering, you know, since we're all online and that's a little bit different, I'm just wondering if we could give Pam just a welcome and each other a welcome by just a little hand applause, just saying hi to each other in this strange virtual land that we're in. And that would be kind of, yeah, we're welcoming each other and you, Pam. But it's such a gift to hear you read and see those pictures. And it's quite different for us at 350 Colorado. So I just am very grateful. And for all of us who showed up today and are giving ourselves this time just to connect and listen and reflect, I'm just delighted to be here with you all. So Pam, we have a couple of questions for you, and I wanted to let everyone else know who's listening that towards the end of our evening together, you will also have a chance to ask your questions, and you can actually put them in the chat at any time, and we'll be monitoring those. And then towards the end of the evening, we'll be asking all of your questions. So feel free to put those in the chat at any time. So Pam, is it all right, Pam, if I dive in with a few of our questions?
Sure, of course.
Okay,
Great. So I was going to ask you a bigger picture question towards the end, but it feels appropriate to start with it. So I want to read a quote from your book and ask you about hope. As you know, we're all climate activists and we're working our tails off to fight the climate crisis. And having hope can be hard sometimes, especially right now as the West is burning and all sorts of things are happening. But I want to read something that you wrote, and then I'd love to hear your reflections for us about, what keeps you hopeful in this time. So you had said, and I just love this, I started writing toward an answer to the question I wake up with every morning and go to bed with every night. How do I find hope on a dying planet? And if there's no hope to be found, how do I live in its absence? In what state of being? Respect, tenderness, unmitigated love, the rich and sometimes deeply clarifying dreamscape of vast, inconsolable grief. I love that. And I just love to hear you say more about what keeps you hopeful right now.
Well, I spend a lot of time in a ball. So I guess I'll start with that. I spend a lot of time crying, but I think we all do. But I do have moments, surges, and even sustained periods of hope. And I think, without being super obvious, this week, here we are having this conversation this week, which is maybe the worst week of our lives, in terms of making climate change, the fact of climate change, completely undeniable. But, in that way, but there's hope in that too, right? Like, if we can live in a country where 200,000 people can die, where we can have 200,000 dead bodies and people denying the reality of those literal dead bodies. Climate change is a much easier thing to deny, right? Especially if you live in South Carolina, right? So to me, what's hopeful is the fact that, I do believe it's true, that things were going to have to get very, very dire on many, many levels, not just climactically, but in lots of levels, for people to really wake up and understand that we can't just coast and we can't just go to the mall and we can't just get our drapes changed, that we need to be citizens of this nation if we're going to save it. And we need to be citizens of the world if we're going to, I don't even know if saving it's on the table anymore. You guys know more about that because that's what your organization is all about. But one way or the other, there's a chapter in Deep Creek about my dog dying and about being with my dog when he was dying. And I relate that to, how are we going to be with the earth when it's dying? And, like save or not save seems like binary thinking at this point, right? Like how do we do better? How do we extend it longer? How do we love it through the changes that we're going to see in our lifetimes? How do we change our thinking? Is there a way to really stop the destruction? But in any case, I don't know the answers to these questions. I read a lot, but it seems like lots of people have different opinions about how far gone it all is. Regardless of how far gone it all is, even if we're seeing, the end of life as we know it, like, let's be in it together. Let's love it in its illness. And I think another thing, I know that didn't sound very hopeful, but I do believe that action will come from how bad things are right now. And I do think that's a strange way to think about hope. But the other thing that makes me feel hopeful is that when, during those months of lockdown in Colorado, or we didn't call it lockdown, but during those months where nobody moved, April and May, essentially, right? I don't know about you. I looked around here and it was like the trees were singing, it was like you could imagine the animals up there in the forest, like dancing around the campfire and kind of looking down and going, you think they're all dead in there? And it made me feel, first of all, that we're kind of irrelevant to the planet, that the planet's going to go on without us. I say this in the book, but years ago, really, I had a conversation with a climate scientist, and he said, oh, well, the future of the Earth looks terrible in the 100-year frame, but in the 500-year frame, it looks pretty good. And I said, really? And he said, well, yeah, like there'll be hardly any people here, but the ones who are here will have learned a lot, and like that is hopeful, or it is to me. I've had a lot of good years on this planet. And if I could trade myself right now, if I could just sign off and all the beetle kill would go away and all the forests would be green again and there would be no more air pollution, like I would do it in a second. I would trade my good 58 years that I had until right now for a clean planet, So I think it is hopeful to think that, things are going to happen. World population is going to get decimated, and then maybe they'll start again smarter, And I think during COVID, I realized how irrelevant we were to these beautiful processes that are, that we're messing up, but they're still happening, and the Earth has great power to heal itself. And I think it will after we're gone. And I also think during climate change, sorry, I'm answering too long, but I also think during COVID, I think a lot of us learned all the things we could live without. Like I personally thought that my identity would be somehow challenged if I didn't get on an airplane every 15 minutes. I thought, oh, who am I if I don't fly? That's my big climate, guilt factor. Like I don't have kids. I keep my house at 55 degrees. I do a lot of things right, but I fly a lot, except now. I haven't been on a plane since January. And I really would have thought that would have somehow made me miserable or messed with my sense of self or made me feel trapped. Well, it hasn't, and that's just the beginning. Like I like getting 8 hours of sleep a night. I've never gotten 8 hours of sleep a night in my entire life. And now I do. And that's a good thing. It's a simple good thing. And it doesn't hurt the planet if I go to sleep at a reasonable hour. I used to work all night. I don't need cheese that flew across an ocean to feed me. I don't need fish that came from Japan. All these things that we don't have right now, or that I certainly don't have up here. I barely have, carrots. I didn't really need them, it turned out, and I think probably a lot of us like this simpler life a little better. And I wasn't a good candidate to like it, but I do. And I was feeling so guilty about my flying, like, even though I kept flying because I love flying and I love to go, but I was feeling so guilty about it. And so like one of the great joys of this time is to not have that guilt. So anyway, I think I hope we learned when we were locked down, and I'm basically still, here all the time. I learned about a lot of things I didn't need. I have never said one time, I can't wait till things get back to normal so I can go do X. I haven't said that one time, because first of all, I don't think things are ever going to go back to normal, really. But also, I kind of like this simpler version, and I'm paying attention to that. Sorry, that was like a super long answer, but.
No, well, it's a big topic, and it's true. Thanks for the reminder about the lessons that we're learning right now through COVID and the shifts that we're being forced to consider and make right now. I have another question just around this theme of connection that is our overarching theme for this evening. So this is another quote that I just loved. It's towards the end of your book. You wrote, "After a quarter of a century, I'm starting to learn what farmers like Rick Davey know. When you give yourself wholly to a piece of ground, its goodness enters your bloodstream like an infusion. You will never be alone in the same way again. Your heart will grow down into and back out of that ground like a tree." So my question for you, or our question for you, is, what practices do you have on your land that keep you connected to place? And also, how can those of us who don't have land in that way still cultivate this kind of connection? So we'd love to hear anything that you suggest, just in terms of our fostering our own connection and love with our current place.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this can be true wherever you live. I mean, for me, there's been so many ways I've been connected, through fixing things. Everything breaks here. This is 9,000 feet. So everything breaks all the time. And so like learning to fix it, learning what UV protector to use, learning how to sweep my own chimney, so many things like that, getting my hands into this place, because I'm not handy. It takes me 15 trips to the hardware store, but I've learned how to fix things, even if I'm using like a boot heel of a cowboy boot, and a steak knife, like I can fix things. And that has deepened it. I would say, my animals, like, one big silver lining of COVID for me is that my animals are so happy. They're so happy because I'm here, like I basically haven't left. So, and they're not used to that with me. They're used to having to deal with me coming and going. So I think, watching the animals, I mean, you saw those pictures, like feeding the hay, like going out on a January morning when there's tons of snow and feeding the hay and having all those horses just covered with snow, and then hearing them chomp on the hay. Or I have a couple new horses here this summer, and it's been great because they're just loving it. They have ultimate freedom basically right now, and they're enjoying it so much. I think those daily rituals, whatever they are, and I can love, an apartment. I have loved apartments, but the daily rituals, like since COVID, I started squeezing my own orange juice, and I just try to get oranges whenever I can. And it's like my COVID preventer. And so just like squeezing the orange juice in the morning, and then going out and feeding and listening to the chickens, and, and then the yearly rituals, like getting hay and getting wood and shearing the sheep. And, I just think I'm back to the calendar, but I think, what do you do? What do you always do in June? What do you always do in September? When's the coldest day of the year? I just think noticing, noticing the particularities of the place you are, which is something I do as a writer anyway, but it's those particularities that bind you to a place, I think, whatever that place is. And like I said, I've felt that way about like a tiny apartment in a city too. I don't think it has to be a grand piece of property. I think we're humans, and we love our rituals, and we love our routines, and we love looking at, I talked to some prisoners who I was doing some writing work with prisoners in a maximum security prison, and they looked out of these tiny, tiny little holes because their windows were, like meshed over. And this guy wrote like 5 paragraphs about the tree outside his cell changing every fall, changing its colors. And like, it made me, I mean, I think of that probably every day of my life. I think of him doing that. And I think, you can do your work, Pam. You can write down, this great thing that you got to do yesterday. If he can, if he can take so much pleasure out of that tree that he's looking at through like holes that are like that big. I think it's just noticing the particularities of your space, whatever that space is.
Thank you, Pam. That's such a good reminder. And what's coming up for me is just remembering, in the midst of our activism, to also take time to just appreciate the natural world and be present. I think a lot of us are working hard towards goals, and we want to change, we want to affect change. And then I think there's also kind of what we're doing tonight, just settling in and reflecting and appreciating wherever we find ourselves. So thank you for that reminder. I have one more question. It's a bit more of a personal question, and then we'll hand it back over to you to read. a bit more. And the question is around how I think it was a long road for you to gather the courage to tell the story of your childhood trauma in the first person. And I'm just wondering if you want to reflect at all about that, and if you know, and well, we know that the land had played a role in that, but anything you want to share about that journey, we would welcome hearing about.
Sure. Interestingly, it wasn't that I was afraid to tell it. I wasn't. I've had a lot of therapy. I do a lot of advocacy for, women and children, battered women and children. It was the reason that I hadn't told it in a kind of a plain spoken, this happened to me way, is because I had a teacher at the University of Utah where I went to grad school, the primary fiction teacher at the time. I do talk about him a little bit in this book. I say that he, on the first day of grad school, he said, no mountains, no trees, no skiing, no eyes, no snow, and no female bodily excretions. Those were the rules of our workshop. And I tell that as a funny story because it kind of was, and then I wrote Cowboys Are My Weakness, which is like an aria to all those things. And I tell the story sort of to prove that I didn't listen to him. But another thing he said, not to me, but to someone else in the class who had written an abuse story. As you can imagine, in Mormon culture, there's a lot of sexual abuse of young women. And not that there isn't in larger culture, but someone had written a story about that, and we all came in to talk about it. And this was back in the 90s, so a lot of the books that we think of as like exposing all that hadn't been written yet. I mean, Bastard Out of Carolina, Dorothy Allison's great book that one of the very first books that talked about that out loud, was kind of just out or not quite out. It was a time when that subject matter was pretty new when spoken about directly. And she brought this story in, and we talked about it, but the first thing that professor said was, you can't swing a dead cat anymore without hitting an abuse story. And even though I pushed back on so much that professor said, somehow I internalized that, even though he wasn't even talking to me. And really I thought, oh, well, you can't write about that because it's so boring, because it's just another boring dead cat. Nobody wants to hear you be a victim like that, be a survivor, don't be a victim. So, embarrassing as all of that is, what I just said, that's the truth. And so as long as I could make it pretty, or make it in metaphor, or make it in fiction, or make it in dream, I could kind of do it. But I didn't not do it to protect my parents, who were both long deceased. I did not do it because I'm afraid to talk about it, because I talk about it all the time in front of 200, 400, 1,000 people. I didn't write about it because I thought it would be dull, honestly, and I didn't want to be a dead cat. I carried that around with me for whatever reason. Why do we do things? I would have said that I didn't listen to anything that professor said, but it wasn't true. So, and I didn't really know that until I went out on the road with Deep Creek and everybody wanted to talk about that. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know. I guess I didn't, So anyway, and I was glad I wrote about it. It wasn't particularly hard to write about, like I said, because I've done therapy and all that. It was much harder to write about the whale tangled in the net. It was much harder to write the part about Fenton dying. That those were scenes that were really hard for me to write. It wasn't that hard for me to write. It wasn't traumatically hard to write that abuse. It was hard to paint my parent. I kept saying, make them complicated characters. They're not all bad, because this is what I tell my students all the time. Give your villains 5 positive attributes, and so I was really trying to paint my parents in this complicated way, because of course they were complicated, but once I started to tell the truth about them, it was hard, my mom had really nice hair. What could I say, so that was hard, but it wasn't like traumatic, like, oh my God, can I actually write this, or I'm going to run to the bathroom and throw up. It wasn't like that. But when I did go out on the road and people wanted to talk about it every night, you know, for like 160 nights, basically, I was like, wow, I'm spending a lot of time with my dad. Like, I'm spending a lot of time thinking about my dad, like way more time than I do in real life. And so that got a little weird, you know, when I was on like the meat of the book tour and it was night after night after night after night and saying, well, yeah, my dad. And because here's what people said. And this is so funny. I mean, I'm sure there are abuse survivors here in this room, because there always are. And also because they tend to be the people who want to save the world. But, but the two things that people said to me, which was so like kind of maddening, they'd be like, so I don't understand, like you and your father, you know, like he just did these horrific things to you and your mother let it happen. And then you're 26 years old and you're home watching baseball with him. Like, what's up with that? You know? And I wanted to say, like, do you know any abuse survivors? You know? And I eventually started to say, like, if my dad rose from the grave and walked in this room right now here at this bookstore, like, I would try to say something fun. Like, I would try to prove to him that I was okay and that I had, you know, I had achieved something. And I'd be like, look at all these people, Dad. I'm not such an idiot after all. Like, I would still be trying to prove to him that I wasn't, you know, and I would still talk to him about baseball and I would still try to make him laugh, you know, because that was my role in my family. And I don't think that means that I'm, you know, damaged. I actually think that means I'm sort of less damaged, but not that there's less or more. And then the other thing they would say would be like, well, I did some research and I noticed you dedicated your first book to your parents, you know, so are you expecting me to believe? I was like, well, yes, you know, and I can't explain it to you if you don't want to believe me. So that's when it got a little intense, when I was like having to defend this thing that I've known forever, you know, of course, my whole life. But when you write it in memoir, people apprehend it differently. I never had these conversations, even though this subject is in my other books, you know. But I did write it very plainly, and I said right, like as you said.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing a bit about that personal side of the story. So we are going to hear a bit of reading from your new work, I believe. Is that right, Pam? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just want everyone to know, just so you all know what's coming for the rest of our evening together. So Pam is going to read a bit to us. And then Devin Reynolds, one of our board members. Devin, do you want to wave? She's going to speak for a few minutes. Just really, we want to make sure that we take a moment to just express our gratitude to our community that's here tonight. So we'll hear a few words from Devin. And then Pam will be answering questions from you all. So and please use the chat to share any reflections. I know, you know, if we were in person, we'd be having a break with some crackers and and drinks, right? And being able to mingle a bit. And we know we can't do that right now, but feel free to engage in the chat too. And I just, again, want to say thanks for being here. So Pam, we'd love to hear what you'd like to read for us.
Would it be okay if Devin went? Because of all the flustering when I couldn't get in, I don't have those papers with me. Yeah. So could Devin go and then I'll go? Would that work?
That's perfect.
Okay. I'm listening, but I'm just going to be over here sorting through my papers.
Perfect. Okay. So that's great. So then I will hand it to Devin Reynolds, who is on our board with 350 Colorado, and welcome, Devin.
Hi, everybody. I do want to say thank you. I'm going to talk about why I am a committed volunteer and donor with 350 Colorado. And I'm going to ask those of you who are new to this organization if you want to support this organization with me. So just so you know the full content of what I'm going to say. So first off, I know we have a lot of people here who I know well, who have been longtime donors and volunteers. And I just want to say a huge thank you. I know what it takes from me to stay engaged in climate work, which is so, as we mentioned, painful much of the time. And I am just so grateful to you all for your commitment to creating a sustainable future. And can I ask everyone just give a little hand applause or type in the chat, just huge thank you to all of those here who have supported in the past. Yeah, thank you so much. And Pam, thank you so much for bringing your precious time and stories to us and making these broad connections for us. It's what brings me to the work at 350 Colorado, and it's what brings so many of us here. I know that, you know, I was born in Colorado and grew up hiking here in the summers, even though I moved away. And so every time I'm in, you know, the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission testifying to protect communities from fracking, I'm there and I'm carrying my love of the Rocky Mountain High Country with me into that room. And I think that's what we're all doing in this work. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what 350 Colorado does, we work locally to build the global grassroots movement to solve the climate crisis and to transition to a sustainable future. And that local piece is the most important piece. Our local teams in particular are the heart of the organization. We have 10 groups that are ranged all across Colorado and make change in their own backyards on the land that means the most to them. So just so you know, like some of the things that have happened just recently in Colorado Springs, the local team got the Martin Drake, an early closure for the Martin Drake coal power plant. They, after years of work, convinced the city council to close this plant early, and not only that, but skip over the natural gas phase and straight on to renewable energy. Just like one amazing thing. The Central Colorado folks in the Buena Vista area and Salida area have run a festival for Mother Earth that gets the whole community out into the streets. And I think, you know, celebrating some of the joy of being connected to the land. The city of the Denver folks got the city of Denver to divest all of their investment portfolio from fossil fuels. And in Boulder County, we've had the first local bans on fracking. Even though those have been overturned, we're still working to make those happen in a permanent way. So these are just some of the accomplishments, and we're in the midst of fundraising so that our local teams can hire coordinators. Our organization, in spite of how difficult things are right now, is growing. People understand and are committed to making sure this work expands. So it's really incredible to see that we're able to actually hire more people to make sure that our local efforts are stronger than ever. And so what I'm going to ask you all, if you haven't supported 350 Colorado before, I'm asking you to make a donation to support our local teams. And we are a grassroots funded organization. So we are funded mostly by small donors, and every little bit counts. So if it's $3.50 or $35 or $350, you'll be supporting not only the work that our organization does, but that future that we all wish and hope and work for, of a sustainable relationship where both people and the earth can thrive together. So I think Deb is putting the donation link into the chat. And I want to give a huge thank you to those of you who are able to donate today. If you're comfortable, you can go ahead and type in the chat and say, I just donated, because then we can give you a more personal thank you at the end of this event. And like I said, as a grassroots organization, that means that all of us here, like, we are the organization. There is no 350 Colorado without us. So thank you for being here and for working so that this future that we all envision becomes a reality.
Thank you so much, Devin, for sharing that and for reminding us of some of the progress that we've been making. And I see someone put in the chat that this past week we had another milestone where the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission is now advocating for 2,000-foot setbacks, which is pretty remarkable. It's not anywhere near enough still, but it's still a little, a little bit of movement. So
unheard of. It's unheard of on that level.
It's a big increase from 500.
Right, exactly. So I want to hand it back to Pam. So thank you, Devin. And Pam, I had muted all of us while Devin was speaking. I'm just going to give you the opportunity to unmute. Okay, perfect. And then we'd love to hear whatever you want to share with us per your reading. And then we'll have questions from the audience, from all of us. Go ahead, Pam.
Okay. Devin, I just want to tell you, like, to hear you speak so passionately, I didn't say this earlier about hope, and I should have, and this will give me a chance to talk a little bit about this little book, Airmail, which is about to come out before I share something different that I'm going to share with y'all. But so Orion Magazine asked Amy Irvine, the activist, environmental activist and writer, to write a few letters back and forth to each other for their series called Alone Together at the start of the pandemic. And we had never met. I knew her book and she knew my book. She knew a couple of my books and I knew her book, Desert Cabal. But we had never met. We had some friends in common. And so we started writing these letters right in March. And soon, and turned in our 3,000 words or whatever to Orion. But the letters were keeping us sane and engaged and in communion in a way. She lives on the other side of the San Juan. She lives in Norwood. And so we felt like we were sending these letters back and forth over the San Juans to each other. And quickly the letters became these sort of girl power, save the earth, let's follow Greta and the others into this future. It became a book of activism. It became a call to action. We didn't know we were writing a book. We were just writing letters. And, at some point at about the 30,000 word mark, we were like, okay, this is something. And we should try to get this thing out before the election, because it might just make some small difference to someone, because it was really a call to arms and a call to action in a way that I had never, we egged each other on, and we kind of fell in love the way you do, like girlfriend love. And we were kind of trying to impress each other, with our verve and our determination, so it just kept building and building. It was so much fun to write. I've never had so much fun writing a book. And so we went to Torrey House Press, which is a wonderful nonprofit, press in Southern Utah, dedicated to the land and dedicated to saving the land. They publish lots of Craig Childs, lots of those kinds of authors. And they were like, yeah, we can get this out. So like this, we hadn't even finished writing the letters in May, and now there's a book, which is just unheard of in publishing. But there it is. It's called Airmail, and there's our crows flying the letters across the San Juans and the Uncompahgre Plateau. And it's basically out. I mean, it doesn't officially come out for a few weeks, but books are available through Torrey House. And we'll be doing an event in Boulder, a socially distanced event, but we'll be doing like a signing along with that event, because only I think 12 people can come to the event or something. But we can't wait. We start our tour. We're doing live tour. We're doing outside events, socially distanced, and we start next Saturday. And I can't wait. As you all know, well, despair comes from inaction. And when you act, you feel so much less despair. And this book has been that for me. So I can't wait till it's in the world, which it virtually is. Well, I guess we can't use the word virtually that way anymore. It almost is. So that's that. But I commend you all, seriously. Like, there's no more time, as you all know, like, to sit around. Like, we got to be acting every day, and I am trying to act every day. And I know you are too. So thank you for that. All right. So what I'm going to read to you from now is a little series that I did, again, right at the start of the pandemic, which was a friend of mine, a young photographer named Kyle Wolf, asked 50 of us to participate in this project where every day she gave us a word, a single word, and we took a photograph of that word, and then we wrote some words about that word. So there were these little mini essays accompanied by photographs, and there were 20 of them. And the wonderful organization Terrain, I don't know if you know about terrain.org, but they are basically an online environmental magazine, and they're fantastic. They have published these. So I'm only going to read like about a third of them because of time. I'm going to show you all 20 pictures and tell you what the word was. And I'm only going to read about a third of them. But if you want to go see the others, you can go see them on terrain.org. And in general, if you care about the planet and the climate, which I know you do, it's a really good magazine for you to know about, because they do wonderful nonfiction and fiction and poetry. So, all right, I'm going to share my screen. And slideshow. No. Edit. No. View. There we go. That's how you do it. Okay. So this is, I will read this one. This is home. Home was the word. That was our first word we were given. The date is March 24th. I won't say all the dates, but it was basically a word a day from March 24th going forward. Today we hung the laundry outside for the first time this year. Hung it outside as opposed to in the mudroom, because this house was not plumbed for a dryer and has never had one. We had to post hole through about 18 inches of snow to do it, but it stayed above freezing for 4 or 5 hours and the clothes got dry. We came home from a long walk up the gated off portion of Rio Grande Reservoir Road, where Livy and Henry got on a herd of about 25 elk, cows, and calves. It was no contest, of course. The dogs exhausted themselves before they were within 200 yards of them, and the elk popped over the ridge to the next valley without even downshifting. After I brought in the laundry, Mike and I made lamb stew, lamb, parsnips, turnips, potatoes, turmeric, garlic, onion, celery, carrots, thyme, parsley, oregano, and a Fresno pepper for good measure. Right now, more than ever before, home is safety. Home is sleep. Getting enough sleep for possibly the first time in my whole life. Home is a bathtub with a view of Bristol Head. Home is also what it has always been. Dogs, horses, sheep, chickens, and a donkey who wants to make trouble with everybody. Home is being married. There's a new one. Like really being married. 24/7 togetherness was not a thing I ever wanted nor expected to have, not even when I said I do 2 years ago to the easiest going man in the universe. Yet here we are. And this only child who has never in her life had enough alone time is so far doing okay. Each morning, Mike gets up first and brings me my Breathe Easy tea with Manuka honey. I read a student manuscript or two before I get up and make green chili eggs. In 26 years of living on this ranch, I have never been home without the next time I have to leave again looming, without one airline ticket in my pocket and another in my underwear drawer. I have understood for quite a while now how that makes me a big part of the problem. For the first time in my life, I am home for as far down the road as I can see. And then I will skip several. This word was unknown, but there's my bathtub with the view of Bristol Head, which you can't quite see. This one, I think I'll read. This one is called Free. My William, my good, good boy. How I miss him. Dogs have everything to teach us about freedom. They give so freely, love so freely. William loved so freely, he used to gather his squeaky toys together as if to comfort them. William welcomed the day, whatever it was, with a wag and a sigh. We talk about being in the present moment, but we don't get 1/110th of the way there compared to even the most neurotic dog. I spent so much of my childhood dreaming of being free of my dad's abuse, of my mother's drunken sadness. And then I got free, but somehow became my own jailer, proving, working round the clock as if I were on some kind of permanent game show. What has all of that work added up to now? The country is descending hard and fast into fascism. The government has closed its borders, suspended its immigration programs, stopped giving out passports, has stopped even pretending they aren't trying to take away our rights. Oil is worth -$3 a barrel. And yet Trump is opening more and more protected lands to drilling. Every government agency is continuing to be dismantled from within. But what about this day, says the dog. And when the human can't come up with an answer, the dog says, I think it could be a good one. That is Recipe. That is Dirt. This is a very short one. The word was strange, and it's strange how simple life becomes when the only really important thing is breathing. This is Dance. This is Creature. I'll read this one. That is what we are, every one of us, though so many humans have forgotten. And I suspect one of the reasons COVID is here, if there are any reasons COVID is here, it is to remind us of our creaturehood, to remind us of one of the most basic laws of natural selection, which is that any species that overpopulates profoundly spoils its nest and dies. Maybe a reason COVID is here, if there are any reasons, is to show us exactly how easily the earth will go on without us, how delighted she would be if we never came out of our houses again. Because we have forgotten how to walk on her like creatures. We drive on top of her on pavement. We fly over her like miniature gods. I am guilty of flying back and forth across her so often that before COVID, the guilt was rising up and becoming a daily source of trouble inside of me. I love to fly. I love to go. But right now, it feels so good not to. Yesterday, there was a mountain lion at the end of my driveway. This morning in the chicken house, a ground squirrel stood up on his hind legs and challenged me for the scratch. There are so few cars on the road, so few planes in the sky, so few recreators in the mountains. I wonder if the animals think they are finally winning. And maybe, in fact, they are. Maybe this is just the first of many self-inflicted plagues that will befall the humans. Or maybe even this time we will be locked up so long we will finally learn something. My prayer for this time is that if and when we emerge, more of us will emerge more creaturely. My prayer for myself will be to remember that I am a creature and need creaturely things, like 7 hours of sleep a night, clean air and water, healthy whole foods, and time each day that is not devoted to working. May we all find our inner creature these months at home and then tend to them heartily when we emerge. This one is called Alcohol. I'm going to read it because I love looking at that picture. That's my favorite picture. By some miracle beyond my understanding, I didn't get the gene. My parents were both drunks. I use the word consciously. In a normal week, they together went through 3/5 of vodka. In a bad week, the numbers could go anywhere. My father broke my femur when I was 4 in a semi-drunken rage, maybe just a rage. My mother was too drunk to care when, for nearly 10 years, he dragged me with him into the shower. I say none of that to sensationalize anything and hopefully not to trigger anyone. I am not angry or bitter. I have just learned that when it comes to abuse, facts work better than euphemisms. I drank some in college because everybody did, but I didn't care about it. I drank some at writer gatherings over the years because if I didn't, everyone looked at me pityingly and I didn't want to have to explain. About 10 years ago, I realized I didn't have to keep drinking for anyone else's social comfort. Now I'm a situational drinker. And when I say that, I mean maybe 10 drinks a year. I had a few drinks when I went to Iceland because they make their own gin and I wanted to ingest everything Icelandic. I had 2 drinks at my own bachelorette party because Sarna used my favorite Fever Tree ginger beer in the Moscow Mules. I have not had a drink since the pandemic began and only a very few during the Trump presidency because I have been in survival mode since I first heard he was going to be a candidate, and a person in survival mode needs all of their senses alive. Most of my friends drink, but I have steered my life away from those who drink a lot. I don't like to be around drunk people, and not being around them is an act of care and kindness I have decided to allow myself. So much damage was done to me as a child, and while alcohol was not the reason, it was often the excuse. I have grown out of that damage, and to a certain extent, am free of it. In other words, I could probably drink reasonably safely, but I don't. As I think about it now, not drinking is a kind of freedom. It is the freedom to get up at 7 a.m. on a frosty morning, bundle up, go outside, and photograph the ice crystals on your Pasofino's back. This one is called Dizzy. Let me just see, what time is it? I'll read Dizzy. I passed out in the shower in a hotel room in Oxford, Mississippi. That was how I knew this was no ordinary flu. It was the start of the 3rd week of February. No reason to think I had the coronavirus, but there I was, face wedged into the corner of the low bathtub, coming to, getting up to my hands and knees and over the lip and out onto the tile floor of the bathroom, shower still running, water everywhere, but here came the blackness from both sides of my eyes again. I put my face against the mercifully cold tile, saw with the last of my vision that my pajamas tossed on the bathroom floor were getting soaked from the still cascading water. What must have been about 10 minutes later, I came to again. I knew if I were not in the lobby within 45 minutes, Cindy would come looking for me. I closed my eyes. 45 minutes was long enough to die. And if I died in Oxford, Mississippi, naked on the tile of the Graduate Hotel, who would care? They already had William Faulkner. I opened my eyes and tried to make them stay that way. After thinking about it for a very long time, I was able to get myself off the floor of the bathroom, get dressed, stuff my soaked pajamas into the outside pocket of my suitcase, roll myself down to the lobby, and order 4 herbal teas to go. According to my watch, my heart rate had gone to 150 beats per minute several times in the hours when I was ostensibly sleeping. This, we now know from all the accounts, is the part where the blood doesn't have enough oxygen and the patients are texting their loved ones right before they die. A week and a half after I passed out in the shower, the first US COVID death would be announced in Washington State, and in another week, I would be able to climb 1 flight of stairs without nearly fainting. This is me yesterday, nearly 2 months later, with a little bit of color finally returned to my face. I'll skip most of the rest. This is called Up. That's my Icelandic you, Jordan. That was called Woman. This is called Guilt. This is Tenderness. That was Time. That was Nostalgia. That was Connection. And I'll just read three more short ones, which are the last three. This is chaos. Nothing about what is happening right now feels chaotic to me. This was all preordained the moment America decided it didn't want to be run anymore by smart people. A logical result. Also, as of this writing, 95% of us or more are being almost absurdly orderly. Washing our hands for 20 seconds, staying home, wearing our masks, nursing the sick, even the ones who call the virus a hoax. If anything, I feel less chaotic at this moment than any other time since 2016. What felt like chaos was when I felt like I was the only one who saw the chaos coming. But that's grandiose. I was never the only one who saw the chaos coming. But I was the one most of my friends and my husband and my neighbors wished would shut the hell up about the disasters that were about to befall us because we had put a malignant narcissist into the most powerful position in the world. A lot of us were raised by malignant narcissists. If you want to see the effect of what answering to a malignant narcissist does to a person in just a few weeks' time, watch the footage from camera 2 of today's president's press conference. Keep your eyes on Dr. Bricks. It is 10 seconds of the last of a person's sense of self leaving her body. To get to real chaos, I have to go back to my childhood home, to the age of 4 and 8 and 11. With malignant narcissism, there is no waiting it out, and there is no winning, and there is no reasoning, and above all the other things there are not, there is definitely no, if only I could make him see. Take it from my broken femur. Take it from the little girl who was raped 7 ways till Sunday for more than a decade. There is no moment the malignant narcissist becomes president, father. There is no stopping him until everything around him lies in ruins. The only option is running. And in one way or another, I've been running my whole life, through and beyond my father's death to his weird reincarnation as the president of the United States. The moment I feel I have to get out of here to literally survive, you can be sure I will run again, across whatever border, open or closed. This is called Dear You, was the assignment. Dear You. You have permission to sit in the middle of the floor and cry, to spend half the day reading poetry, to eat all the hummus with a spoon, to rescue a horse who needs a new home, even though the future is uncertain, to move to a country where people believe healthcare is a right, to stay in this country and fight alongside the people who believe healthcare is a right, to leave this ranch forever, to be late getting the manuscripts back, to wear a mask to the grocery store, to flip off the maskless dude in the wife beater who puts his hand on your cart and asks if you vote Democrat, to wish him momentarily dead, to play wordscapes in the bathtub, to use up 3 tanks of hot water playing wordscapes in the bathtub, to love the absence of airplanes, to order organic Meyer lemons online, to pray for rain and when it comes, to let it make you full of hope, to be afraid of the men with guns, to be afraid of the men, to be afraid, to care about the dogs more than the humans, to start listening to music again, even though it makes you cry. And this is the very last one in the series. The word was love. For the last 2 months, I have spent every minute of every day with my husband, Mike. We have been married almost 2 years now, have been together almost 3. I have always said I am not the marrying kind. I am not only an only child, I am also a Capricorn. I am a goat walking up the hill slowly, and I like doing things my own way. Each day we wake up one step further into the realization that our lives will never be the same. COVID is only part of that. The president is hell-bent on civil war, and to read the news each day is to understand he may get it. Like so many people, my income, my working life, my range of motion has been shrunk down to 1/100th of its former size. And all the people eager to breathe on me at my local post office to express their patriotism means I have stopped even getting the mail. There is no doubt in my mind that millions of Americans will be dead before the president is stopped or slowed down or held accountable, and Mike and I may well be among them. I never asked for or wanted what my friend Fenton Johnson calls a fortress marriage, but now I am in one through no fault of mine or Mike's. We take turns having bad days, sad days, hopeless days, though I get 5 for every one of his. My father was so very Trump-like, and my childhood home was Trump's America, everyone gaslighted and constantly taking tiny steps back. This feeling of being trapped under the thumb of someone who enjoys cruelty for its own sake is as familiar to me as my name. But I was alone in my childhood house, and now I have an ally, someone who loves me truly, someone with whom I can stay and fight or try to escape or just try to find the small good thing about each day. Love under this kind of pressure is love scrutinized and illuminated. It is love tested and found durable. It is cancer ward love, hospice love, although it is not one of us but our country that is dying. Mike is building garden boxes in the yard so we can plant vegetables. He has taken over the job of feeding the rams because one of them likes to take my knees out from behind. When I feel I don't have it in me to continue to hope for a miracle, Mike takes me to the window, shows me Venus, sparkling like hope itself in the indigo post-sunset sky.
Thank you so much, Pam. Let's give our virtual applause. Thank you so much.
It's really fun for me to read those because they're newish and I haven't read them very much. And it's fun with the pictures.
Yeah, so lovely. Thank you. And yeah, lovely to look at your photos too. So we're just about at the close of our time together. And I think we've all just been listening, and I've been watching to see if we have questions. We only have a few, and I apologize in advance because I know we won't get to all of them. But I think the most important thing was hearing from you, Pam, and hearing your reading. So I'm glad we did that. So I'll just ask one of these questions. I think it'll be a good one to end with, and then we'll close. So Pam, how did you grow to open to nature and let it mother you? However you want to answer that. I think that seems like a lovely closing question.
Yeah. Well, neither of my parents were outdoorsy at all. My mom was a showgirl and my dad was a tennis player. And, but there was this guy in our neighborhood named Colonel Bob Miller when I grew up in Pennsylvania. And he took all of the kids in the neighborhood camping for a weekend every summer. And it was everyone's favorite weekend. And the funny thing about Colonel Bob, he made us, it was like 15 or 20 kids and him. And he made us ride in the backs of station wagons under blankets. And he told us we were going out west. And it was, 110 degrees in like July in Pennsylvania. And so of course we believed him because we were under these wool blankets, like dying. And he'd be like, oh, we just crossed the Mississippi River, or we just crossed the wide Missouri. And then he'd stop and he'd have to get permission for us to enter the reservation by the chief, and he'd talk Indian to him. And then we would get to camp, and we had, many things. We had, games in the woods where you had to find destinations. We had a bravery test after dark where you had to follow markers through the woods. We had night watches, including the Dead Man's Watch from 3 to 4 a.m., where there was always like 2 kids and 3 marshmallows and 1 hot dog. Like everything was designed to teach us about something. And then in the morning, we had what he called church with Reverend Miller, where he basically talked about, he basically had like a druidic philosophy. He would talk about how nature is so healing and precious. And anyway, I did that every year from the year we moved to Pennsylvania when I was 5. And then I went back like from college and helped him, with the kids. And it was really he who gave me my appreciation. We were, by the way, at like a city park in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Like we were at an overgrown portion of the city park. We had gone about 7 miles. But in my mind, it was the West. I mean, I knew it wasn't, but that's what it was. It was like going out West and having all this fun in nature. And, I really credit him with a lot of my love of nature, those weekends, which were the best weekends of my childhood, honestly. And then when I was in college in Ohio, I had started camping. My friend Mary and I would, cut out on Friday afternoon and drive down to West Virginia and go hiking and camping. And that's when I started doing it more on my own, was in college. And that's when I started reading Edward Abbey, speaking of Desert Cabal, and, sort of started to get that. I want to go out West. I want to see that beauty. I want to see that land. And, but it was really Colonel Bob Miller and his commitment to teaching, 15, 20 kids from this super suburban neighborhood about being in the woods and surviving in the woods and loving the woods and respecting the woods, all of that.
Thank you so much for that. I love all the stories that you were able to bring to us tonight. Thank you. So I know we're just about at the end of our time together. Pam, was there anything else you wanted to say in closing before we end this evening?
Well, only that, only that I appreciate so much what you're doing. And, my belief about right now is, that there's a lot of forces trying to gaslight us and a lot of forces trying to scare us out of what we know our own power is. And, I'm super dedicated to gathering into community with others, other artists, other activists, other environmentalists, in whatever form that takes. And, like the people who want to save and help and care and love and accept widely and like we have more power than they do. They just have the guns, and that's a little scary. But I really believe that if we work together and step into our own power as people who care about the earth, we're going to win. I don't know what we're going to win, but we're at least going to stop this train wreck, and we're going to be able to, start from a place. I mean, if you just think about, I'm going to shut up in a minute, but if you just think about COVID for a second, like COVID would be so hard if we were all trying together. It would still be hard. So like, that's what I want for the climate. I want us all to say, okay, this is bad. We gotta work together. And I believe that's possible. I do. I can see it. I can feel it. I can feel so many people like ready to step into their power. And we just have to not let the fear mongers win.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you so much again, both to you, Pam, and to everybody who's here tonight, and for everything that all of you are doing in the form of action and activism and advocacy. So I just want to say a huge thank you, and thank you again to all of our supporters and donors who are here, and just a huge thanks. Lots of gratitude to all of you. So as we leave, I invite all of you to put something in the chat that you're really grateful for. So it can be about our evening together, or it can be about the place where you live. But as you're leaving, before you sign off, just please pop something in the chat. If you can, if you have that, if you're on Zoom in that way, just share a gratitude for one another as you leave. And then we'll just all wave goodbye, and thank you all so much. Good night, everybody. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening. And Pam, thank you again so much for the time together.
People in the chat are asking if my essays are available for purchase. I mean, I do have a book of essays called A Little More About Me that has an essay that tells the story of Colonel Bob in it. Those essays that I just read are available free online at terrain.org, which again, I highly recommend for so many reasons, not just my essays. It's a wonderful place to read essays and poems and stories about the environment. So those essays that I read are free online. And then this little book, I hope you'll support. Airmail, that's coming soon. And you can order it right now from Torrey House Press, or you can get it at the Boulder Bookstore very soon, if that's your bookstore, or whatever your local independent is, should have it very soon. But thank you for asking that. Those essays are yours to enjoy in their entirety on terrain.org.
Perfect. Thank you, Pam. Yeah, and if there's anything else you want to share with us, feel free to put it in the chat too. We're recording this, and it's on Facebook Live right now too. So folks will be able to see anything that you share. If there's any other website link or anything, feel free to put it in.
Okay.
But again, thank you, everyone, and it's so great to see. I love seeing what people are putting in the chat too before people are leaving. Thanks again, everyone.
Owen's at the baseball game, it seems.
I know, I saw that. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Pam, it was such a delight to meet you, and thanks for all your good work.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.